The screaming sirens pierced through the quiet suburban night as Officer Jake Thompson gripped the steering wheel of his patrol car, his knuckles white with determination. Beside him, Rex shifted restlessly in his specialized K9 compartment, his keen senses already detecting the acrid smell of smoke that was still miles away. The radio crackled with urgent dispatches. Structure fire at 1247 Maple Street. Possible entrapment. All units respond immediately. Jake's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. Maple Street. He knew that neighborhood well. Just last month, he and Rex had visited Sunshine Daycare on that very street for their monthly community outreach program. He remembered a little girl with pigtails and bright brown eyes who had been absolutely fascinated by Rex, giggling with pure joy as the German Shepherd demonstrated his training exercises. What was her name? Emma Rodriguez. His heart clenched as he realized the address matched the area where many of the daycare families lived. As they rounded the corner onto Maple Street, the scene that greeted them was pure chaos. Orange flames were shooting through the roof of a modest 2-story home, illuminating the night sky with an ominous glow. Fire trucks were already positioned strategically around the perimeter, their powerful hoses sending torrents of water into the inferno. But the fire seemed to mock their efforts, growing larger and more aggressive by the minute. Fire Chief Rodriguez, no relation to the family inside, was barking orders through his radio when Jake screeched to a halt. "Thompson, thank God you're here. We've got a family trapped inside, parents and a 3-year-old girl. The staircase is still partially intact, but we estimate maybe 10 minutes before the whole structure goes." Jake's blood ran cold. He looked at the house number painted on the mailbox that somehow remained untouched by the chaos around it. 1247. This was Emma's house. The little girl who had spent an entire afternoon last month teaching Rex to shake hands and had begged her mother for a dog just like him. Where are they located? Jake shouted over the roar of the flames and the thunderous noise of the fire engines. Parents were spotted at a second-floor window on the east side. We got a ladder positioned, but the little girl, she's somewhere upstairs, probably hiding. The parents are refusing to come down without her. Jake didn't hesitate. While other officers were setting up a perimeter and directing traffic, he was already moving toward the house. Rex barked frantically from the patrol car, sensing his partner's intention and desperately wanting to follow. But this was no place for a dog, no matter how well trained. "Stay, Rex," Jake commanded, his voice firm despite the emotional turmoil churning in his chest. Rex whined but obeyed, his intelligent brown eyes fixed on his human partner with an intensity that spoke of their unbreakable bond. The heat hit Jake like a physical blow as he approached the front door. The wooden frame was already warped from the intense temperature, and smoke was pouring out of every opening like a living, breathing monster. He grabbed his radio one last time. "Unit 247 going in for rescue attempt. If I'm not out in 8 minutes, nobody else comes in after me." The response was immediate and desperate. "Negative, Thompson. Structure's too unstable. Wait for the ladder truck to reposition." But Jake was already pushing through the front door, his flashlight cutting through the thick black smoke that immediately enveloped him like a suffocating blanket. The familiar layout he remembered from community policing visits was now a nightmarish maze of flames and falling debris. Pictures on the hallway walls were melting, their glass frames exploding from the heat. He found Maria and Carlos Rodriguez huddled together at the bottom of the staircase, both suffering from severe smoke inhalation, but conscious and desperately trying to reach the second floor. Maria was sobbing hysterically. "Emma, my baby is up there. She's hiding under her bed. She always hides there when she's scared." "I've got this," Jake told them firmly, his voice muffled by his breathing apparatus. "Get outside now. The ladder crew will help you down." Carlos grabbed Jake's arm with surprising strength. "Please, Officer Thompson. Please bring back our little girl. She talks about you and Rex all the time. She calls you the nice policeman with the big doggy." The weight of that responsibility settled on Jake's shoulders like a mountain, but it also fueled his determination. He guided the parents to the window where firefighters were already positioning a ladder, then turned back to face the staircase that led to the second floor, and to Emma. Each step up the burning staircase was a battle against time, physics, and his own human limitations. The wooden steps groaned ominously under his weight, some of them already partially collapsed. The temperature was so intense that his protective gear felt inadequate, and the smoke was so thick that his flashlight beam barely penetrated 3 feet ahead of him. When he reached the second floor, the hallway was an inferno. He called out, "Emma! Emma, it's Officer Jake. Remember me and Rex from your school? I'm here to take you to safety." A faint whimpering came from the room at the end of the hall, her bedroom, decorated with princess wallpaper that was now curling and blackening from the heat. Jake crawled on his hands and knees beneath the worst of the smoke, feeling his way along the wall until he reached her doorway. There, huddled under her small pink bed, was 3-year-old Emma Rodriguez, clutching a stuffed German shepherd that looked remarkably like Rex. Her big brown eyes were wide with terror, but when she saw Jake's familiar face, recognition sparked through her fear. "Officer Jake, where's Rex? Is he here too?" "Rex is waiting outside to see you, sweetheart," Jake said, his voice as calm and reassuring as he could make it despite the chaos around them. "But we need to go to him right now. Can you be brave for me?" Emma nodded solemnly and reached her small arms toward him. As Jake scooped her up, wrapping her in his protective jacket, he heard a sound that chilled him to his core, a deep groaning from somewhere above them. The roof was starting to give way. "Hold on tight, princess," he whispered into her ear as he began the desperate race back toward the staircase. "We're going to see Rex in just a minute." But as they reached the top of the stairs, Jake realized with crystalline clarity that they weren't going to make it. The staircase was collapsing, the ceiling above them was sagging dangerously, and he could hear the firefighters outside screaming into their radios, "Evacuate! Everyone out! The structure's coming down!" In that final moment, Officer Jake Thompson made the choice that defined not just his death, but his legacy. Instead of trying to save himself, he threw his body over little Emma Rodriguez, shielding her with everything he had as the burning ceiling crashed down around them. His last conscious thought was of Rex, waiting faithfully outside, and his last whispered words were, "Tell Rex. Tell him he's a good boy." Outside, Rex's howls of anguish pierced through the night as the house collapsed, his canine instincts telling him that his partner, his best friend, his whole world, wasn't coming back. The German shepherd had lost more than his handler that night. He had lost his purpose, his family, his reason for being. But in the rubble, wrapped protectively in Jake's jacket and sheltered by his sacrifice, Emma Rodriguez was still breathing. The hero's last mission was complete. Detective Sarah Martinez had been staring at the same piece of security footage for 3 hours straight, her bloodshot eyes burning from exhaustion and unshed tears. The timestamp in the corner read, 2:47 a.m., exactly 12 minutes before the first 911 call, reporting the fire at 1247 Maple Street. She rewound the grainy black and white video for what felt like the 100th time, watching a shadowy figure creep between houses with what appeared to be a gas container in his left hand. The coffee in her mug had gone cold hours ago, but Sarah barely noticed. She had been Jake Thompson's friend for over 8 years, ever since they graduated from the police academy together. They had been partners for 3 years before Jake transferred to the K9 unit, and she had been there the day he first met Rex, a rambunctious 2-year-old German shepherd with attitude and intelligence that matched Jake's own determination. Still at it, Martinez? Lieutenant David Chun peered over her shoulder, his own exhaustion evident in the dark circles under his eyes. The entire department had been working around the clock since Jake's death 3 days ago. The fire marshal's preliminary report just came in. Definitely arson. Accelerant was poured in a trail from the back porch to the basement. Professional job, but the arsonist made one critical mistake. Sarah looked up from the screen, her detective instincts suddenly sharp despite her fatigue. What kind of mistake? Chung dropped a thick manila folder on her desk. He used his credit card to buy the gasoline at a station 4 blocks away, just 2 hours before the fire. Marcus Webb, 34 years old, construction worker for Hartley and Associates. And here's where it gets interesting. His ex-wife lives at 1251 Maple Street, just 4 houses down from the Rodriguez family. Sarah's pulse quickened as she flipped through Webb's file. Domestic violence complaints, 3 restraining orders that had expired, and a bitter custody battle over their 7-year-old son. But what caught her attention was the employment record. Hartley and Associates. Wait, that's the same company that did the renovation work on the Rodriguez house last month. Exactly. And guess who was dating Webb's ex-wife? Tommy Hartley Jr., the owner's son. Webb had been making threats for weeks about teaching that pretty boy a lesson. We think he was trying to burn down a house in the same neighborhood to frame Hartley. Sarah studied the security footage. Again, this time focusing on the figure's build and gait. Medium height, slightly stocky, favoring his left leg. Details that matched Webb's physical description perfectly. So he torches the wrong house by accident? Wind patterns that night were unpredictable. The fire department's arson investigator believes Webb set the initial blaze at 1243 Maple Street, an empty house that's been for sale for 6 months. But the wind shifted, and embers carried to the Rodriguez family's roof. By the time Webb realized his mistake, it was too late to stop what he'd started. The weight of that revelation settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. Jake Thompson had died because of one man's petty jealousy and incompetence. 3 innocent people had nearly been killed, and a hero had made the ultimate sacrifice. All because Marcus Webb couldn't handle the fact that his ex-wife had moved on with her life. Sarah pulled up Webb's driver's license photo on her computer screen. He had the same dead, cold eyes she'd seen in dozens of other criminals over her 12-year career. The look of someone who blamed the entire world for his problems, but never took responsibility for his own actions. Thinning brown hair, a weak chin, and a mouth set in a permanent sneer of resentment. "Where is he now?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. That's the problem. Webb hasn't been seen since the night of the fire. His ex-wife, Jennifer, says he came by her house around 6 a.m. the morning after, acting strange and asking if she'd heard about the fire. When she told him about the police officer who died saving that little girl, she says he went pale and left immediately. She hasn't seen him since. Sarah studied Webb's file more closely, looking for patterns that might predict his next move. His employment record showed a history of job hopping, mostly due to conflicts with supervisors and coworkers. He had been arrested twice for bar fights, both times involving men he perceived as disrespecting him. The psychological profile painted a picture of a narcissist with deep-seated anger issues and a tendency to blame others for his failures. What about family, friends? Places he might run to? Chun shook his head. Parents are deceased, no siblings. His few friends describe him as increasingly paranoid and bitter over the past year, especially after Jennifer filed for divorce. His landlord says he was 3 months behind on rent and had been talking about leaving this town and starting fresh somewhere else. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from the forensics team. She read it quickly, then looked up at Chun with grim satisfaction. Fingerprints on the gas container found in the alley behind Maple Street are a match for Webb. We've got him. That's great news, but it doesn't help us if we can't find him. I've got units checking bus stations, airports, and train depots within a 200-mile radius. Bolo has been issued statewide, but Sarah was already moving, grabbing her jacket and keys. Something in Webb's file had triggered a memory, a small detail that might be the key to finding him. Chun, look at his work history again. 3 jobs in the past 2 years, all construction. But look at the addresses of the job sites. Chun studied the file, his eyebrows rising as he saw the pattern. They're all heading north. Each job further from the city than the last. Exactly. And his last job was on a housing development project just outside Millbrook. That's only 40 miles from the Canadian border. I'm betting he's holed up in one of those unfinished houses, waiting for the heat to die down before he tries to cross the border. As Sarah headed for the door, Chun called after her. Martinez, take backup. This guy's already killed 1 cop. Don't give him the chance to kill another. Sarah paused in the doorway, her hand on the handle. Jake was my partner before he went to K9. He saved my life twice, and I never got the chance to return the favor. This bastard took away one of the best men I've ever known, and he traumatized a 3-year-old little girl who's going to have nightmares for the rest of her life. I'm bringing him in, Chun, dead or alive. The drive to Millbrook took 45 minutes through winding country roads that gave Sarah too much time to think. She kept seeing Jake's face the day he introduced her to Rex. The pride in his voice when he talked about their first successful drug bust together. The way he lit up whenever he talked about the community outreach programs they did with local schools. She thought about Emma Rodriguez, the little girl who was alive because Jake Thompson had been willing to die for her. Sarah had visited the hospital twice since the fire, watching Emma sleep peacefully while her parents maintained their vigil. The child had no idea yet that her nice policeman with the big doggy was never coming back. As Sarah pulled into the construction site outside Millbrook, she radioed her location to dispatch and requested backup. 6 partially completed houses stood in various stages of construction, their skeletal frames casting long shadows in the afternoon sun. If Webb was hiding here, he could be in any of them. She checked her weapon and started toward the first house, her senses alert for any sign of movement. Marcus Webb had destroyed so many lives with his selfish, cowardly act. But his luck was about to run out. Justice for Jake Thompson was coming. Maria Rodriguez sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside her daughter's hospital bed, watching Emma's small chest rise and fall with each peaceful breath. It had been 4 days since the fire, and the doctors assured her that Emma's physical injuries were healing remarkably well. The minor burns on her arms would leave no permanent scars, and her lungs were clearing of smoke damage faster than anyone had expected. But it was the psychological wounds that kept Maria awake at night, staring at the ceiling and wondering how to explain the unexplainable to a 3-year-old mind. Emma stirred in her sleep, her tiny fist clutching the stuffed German shepherd that had somehow survived the fire. The toy dog was slightly singed around the edges, its black fur now tinged with gray from the smoke, but Emma refused to let it out of her sight. She called it Little Rex and whispered to it constantly, as if it could somehow connect her to the real Rex, and through him, to the man who had saved her life. Mommy? Emma's voice was barely a whisper as she opened her brown eyes, still heavy with sleep and medication. Is the doggy's daddy here yet? Maria's heart clenched for what felt like the 1000th time since Emma had first asked that question 2 days ago. How do you tell a 3-year-old the heroes don't always get to go home? How do you explain death to someone who still believes that broken toys can be fixed with enough kisses, and that nightmares disappear when you turn on the lights? Baby, remember what Mama told you yesterday? Officer Jake. He had to go away. Emma sat up slowly, her face scrunching with the intense concentration that only small children can muster when trying to understand something that doesn't make sense. But when is he coming back? I want to tell him thank you. And I want to pet Rex again. Rex was so soft and nice. Maria glanced toward the doorway, where her husband Carlos stood with Dr. Patricia Hayes, Emma's pediatrician. They had been discussing Emma's care plan in hushed tones for the past 20 minutes, and Maria could see the concern etched in both their faces. Dr. Hayes had explained that children Emma's age often struggled with the concept of death, sometimes taking months or even years to fully understand that someone they cared about was never coming back. Emma, sweetheart, Maria began carefully, using the gentle tone she had practiced with the hospital's child psychologist. Sometimes when people are very, very brave and help others, they have to go to a special place where they can't come back from. Officer Jake was the bravest man in the whole world, and he made sure you were safe. But now he's in heaven taking care of all the other angels. Emma's eyes widened with a mixture of confusion and something that looked almost like anger. But I don't want him in heaven. I want him here with Rex. Rex must be so sad without his daddy. The word daddy hit Maria like a physical blow. In Emma's 3-year-old understanding, the bond between Jake Thompson and Rex was the same as the bond between her and Carlos, a father and child, relationship that should never be broken. She couldn't comprehend why someone would choose to leave their family, even to save someone else's. Carlos entered the room and sat on the edge of Emma's bed, his weathered construction worker's hands gentle as he smoothed her dark hair. Princessa, do you remember the story Mama tells you about the guardian angels? Emma nodded solemnly, her attention fully focused on her father. Carlos had always been better at explaining difficult concepts to their daughter, finding ways to make the complex simple without talking down to her intelligence. Well, Officer Jake became your guardian angel. And Rex ... Rex is like his helper angel, but Rex is still here with us where we can see him. Sometimes guardian angels send us special friends to remind us that they're still watching over us. Can I see Rex? Emma asked suddenly, her eyes brightening with hope. Can he come visit me? I want to tell him that his daddy is a hero, and I want to give him hugs, because he must miss Jake so much. Maria and Carlos exchanged glances over Emma's head. They had been dreading this request, knowing it would come eventually. Detective Martinez had mentioned that Rex was staying at the police station temporarily, being cared for by the other officers, while they decided what to do with him long term. The dog had been inconsolable since Jake's death, refusing to eat and barely responding to commands from anyone else. Dr. Hayes knocked softly on the doorframe before entering. She was a kind woman in her 50s, with silver hair and gentle eyes that had seen too many children struggle with trauma. Good morning, Emma. How are you feeling today? I want to see Rex, Emma announced with the directness that only small children possess. He's probably scared without Officer Jake. I can help him feel better. Mama always makes me feel better when I'm scared. Dr. Hayes sat in the chair beside Emma's bed, her expression thoughtful. Emma, that's a very kind thing to want to do. Rex is indeed very sad right now. But tell me, what do you think would help Rex feel better? Emma considered this question with the seriousness of a philosopher. Well, when I'm sad, Mama gives me hugs and tells me stories and sings songs. And she lets me sleep with little Rex. She held up her stuffed dog. Maybe Big Rex needs hugs too. And maybe he needs someone to tell him stories about how brave his daddy was. Dr. Hayes looked at Maria and Carlos with raised eyebrows. In her 20 years of pediatric medicine, she had seen many children process trauma in various ways. But Emma's mature empathy for an animal she had met only briefly was remarkable. You know, Emma, I think you might be right about Rex needing comfort. But I have to ask you something important. Do you understand that Rex might be different now? That he might be sad and not want to play the same way he did when you met him at school? Emma nodded gravely. When Abula's dog Pepe died, her cat Whiskers was sad for a long time. She didn't want to play or eat treats. But then she got better because we gave her lots of love. Love makes everything better, right, Mama? Maria felt tears threatening to spill over. Her 3-year-old daughter, who had survived a trauma that would haunt most adults for life, was more concerned about comforting a grieving dog than about her own recovery. Maybe, Dr. Hayes said slowly, we could arrange for Rex to visit you here at the hospital. But only if your parents think it's a good idea, and only if Rex's caretakers agree. Emma's face lit up with the first genuine smile Maria had seen since the fire. Really? Rex can come see me? Oh, I have so much to tell him. I want to tell him about the dream I had where Officer Jake had wings and was flying around keeping everyone safe. And I want to show him that little Rex is okay, so he knows that I'm taking good care of something that belongs to his family. Carlos cleared his throat, his voice slightly hoarse with emotion. Dr. Hayes, if we could arrange something like that, ... Do you think it might help Emma process what happened? She keeps asking questions about Jake, and I think she needs closure that we can't give her with words alone. Dr. Hayes nodded. Pet therapy has shown remarkable results with trauma victims, especially children. And in this case, there's something almost poetic about it. Jake Thompson saved Emma's life, and now Emma might be able to help heal Jake's partner. Sometimes healing works both ways. Emma clapped her hands together, a sound that filled the sterile hospital room with pure joy. When can Rex come? Can he come today? I promise I'll be very gentle with him. Mama taught me how to be soft with animals. We'll have to make some phone calls first. Sweetheart, Maria said, already mentally preparing for the conversation she would need to have with the police department. But Emma, you need to understand that this visit might make you feel sad too. Seeing Rex without Officer Jake might remind you of the scary things that happened. Emma's expression grew serious again, her young mind grappling with concepts far beyond her years. Mama, I have scary dreams about the fire every night anyway. But maybe if I see Rex, and I tell him that Officer Jake saved me, and I give him lots of hugs, maybe we can both have better dreams. Maybe we can dream about happy things instead of scary fire. Dr. Hayes made a note in Emma's chart, then looked at the Rodriguez family with something approaching amazement. You know, Emma, I think you might be the smartest 3-year-old I've ever met. And I think Rex is very lucky that you want to be his friend. As Dr. Hayes left the room to begin making arrangements for the unprecedented visit, Emma settled back against her pillows, still clutching little Rex. She began humming softly, the same lullaby Maria sang to her every night before bed, but she was humming to the stuffed dog, as if practicing the comfort she planned to offer the real Rex. Maria watched her daughter and realized that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from the smallest voices, and sometimes healing begins not with forgetting, but with remembering how to love in the midst of loss. District Attorney Michael Chun stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his corner office, watching the morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps below. In his 18 years as a prosecutor, he had handled hundreds of murder cases, but none had affected him quite like this one. The death of Officer Jake Thompson wasn't just another line item in the criminal justice system. It was a tragedy that had shaken the entire community to its core. On his desk lay 2 thick manila folders. The first contained the mountain of evidence against Marcus Webb, fingerprints on the gas container, credit card receipts for the fuel purchase, security footage showing him at the scene, and witness statements placing him in the neighborhood on the night of the fire. It was an airtight case that should have guaranteed a first-degree murder conviction and a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The second folder, however, contained something that made Chun's stomach churn with frustration: Webb's defense attorney's motion for a plea bargain. Defense attorney Patricia Summers, known for her aggressive tactics and her ability to find loopholes in seemingly perfect cases, was arguing that her client should be charged with involuntary manslaughter rather than first-degree murder. Chun picked up Summer's latest filing and read it again, his jaw clenching with each word. While my client's actions were undeniably reckless and resulted in tragic consequences, there was no intent to kill Officer Thompson or harm the Rodriguez family. Mr. Webb's plan was to intimidate his romantic rival by damaging property, not to commit murder. The wind patterns that night were unforeseeable, and the death of Officer Thompson, while devastating, was an unintended consequence of what was essentially a property crime gone wrong. The legal argument was sound, and Chun knew it. Without direct evidence that Webb intended to kill anyone, proving first-degree murder would be challenging. A jury might indeed find it reasonable to believe that Webb was simply an idiot seeking revenge, who accidentally caused a hero's death. The thought of Jake Thompson's killer serving only 8 to 12 years for involuntary manslaughter made Chun's blood boil. His secretary, Janet Morrison, knocked softly on his door. "Mr. Chun? The Rodriguez family is here for their meeting." Chun straightened his tie and took a deep breath. This was going to be the most difficult conversation of his career. How do you tell a family that their daughter's savior might not receive the justice he deserved? Maria and Carlos Rodriguez entered his office looking exhausted but determined. Maria carried a manila envelope that Chun assumed contained more victim impact statements or medical records. What he didn't expect was for her to place a child's drawing on his desk, a crayon masterpiece showing a stick figure in a police uniform with a large dog beside him, surrounded by hearts and flowers. "Emma drew this yesterday," Maria said quietly. "She wanted me to give it to the judge man who's going to make the bad man sorry for hurting Officer Jake. She doesn't understand the difference between a prosecutor and a judge, but she knows someone is supposed to make this right." Chun studied the innocent artwork, noting the careful way Emma had drawn Jake's badge and the loving detail she had put into Rex's fur. At the bottom of the page, in shaky 3-year-old handwriting, were the words Hero Jake and Rex with several letters backwards. "Mr. Chun," Carlos said, his voice heavy with emotion, "we need to ask you something, and we need you to be completely honest with us. Is this man going to pay for what he did to Officer Thompson?" Chun set the drawing aside carefully and leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. The defense is pushing hard for a manslaughter plea. Their argument is that Webb never intended to kill anyone, that Officer Thompson's death was an unintended consequence of what was supposed to be simple property damage. Maria's face went pale. What does that mean? How much time would he serve? 8 to 12 years, possibly less with good behavior. Chun watched as the Rodriguez family absorbed this devastating news. "I want you to understand that I am fighting this with everything I have. But legally, proving intent to kill is going to be challenging." Carlos slammed his fist on the desk, causing Emma's drawing to flutter. "That bastard murdered a hero. Jake Thompson ran into a burning building to save our daughter, and now you're telling us his killer might walk away with a slap on the wrist?" "I'm not giving up," Chun said firmly. "But I need something more. Something that will show the jury exactly what Webb destroyed when he lit that fire. The defense is going to paint him as a lovesick fool who made a terrible mistake. I need to show them that he's a cold-blooded killer who destroyed not just Jake's life, but the lives of everyone who loved him." Maria reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos until she found what she was looking for. She turned the screen toward Chun, showing him a picture from Emma's daycare visit. In the image, Jake was kneeling beside Rex, while Emma and a dozen other children gathered around them, all wearing expressions of pure wonder and joy. "This was taken 3 weeks before the fire," Maria said softly. "Emma talked about this visit every single day. She would ask when Officer Jake and Rex were coming back to school. She was so excited to show them her new backpack with the police dog on it that we bought her after this visit." Chin studied the photograph. seeing the genuine happiness on Jake's face as he interacted with the children. This wasn't just a police officer doing his job. This was a man who loved his community and was loved in return. There's something else, Maria continued. Emma has been asking to see Rex. The hospital arranged for him to visit her yesterday, and, well, something remarkable happened. She showed Sean another photo, this one taken at the hospital. Emma was sitting up in her bed with Rex's massive head resting gently in her lap. Both the child and the dog looked peaceful for the first time since the fire, their shared grief creating an unspoken bond. Rex hadn't responded to anyone since Jake died, Carlos explained. The police officer said he wouldn't eat, wouldn't play, barely acknowledged commands. But the moment he saw Emma, it was like he remembered what he was supposed to protect. They spent 2 hours together, and for the first time since the fire, Emma slept through the night without nightmares. Sean felt something shift inside him as he looked at these images. He had been approaching this case as a legal puzzle to be solved, but these photographs reminded him of the human cost of Webb's actions. This wasn't just about punishing a criminal. It was about honoring a hero's sacrifice and protecting the family he died to save. Would you be willing to let Emma attend the sentencing hearing? Sean asked carefully. Not to testify, she's far too young for that, but simply to be present. To let the judge and jury see exactly who Jake Thompson died protecting. Maria and Carlos exchanged a long look. Years of marriage, allowing them to communicate without words. Finally, Maria nodded. If it will help ensure that monster gets what he deserves, then yes. But we want protections in place. Emma can't be exposed to graphic details or cross-examination. Of course. She would simply be present in the courtroom, probably with Rex beside her. Sometimes the most powerful testimony comes not from what's said, but from what's seen. Sean was already formulating his strategy. Webb's defense was built on the premise that he was just an ordinary man who made a terrible mistake. But if the jury could see Emma, could witness the innocence that Jake Thompson died to protect, they would understand that this was about more than property, damage, and unintended consequences. There's one more thing, Sean said, his voice growing more determined. I want to bring in Dr. Elizabeth Warner, the child psychologist who's been working with Emma. She can testify about the psychological impact of Jake's death on Emma, how it's affected her sleep patterns, her behavior, her understanding of safety and trust. Carlos leaned forward. You think that will make a difference? I think, Sean said, picking up Emma's drawing again, that when a jury sees this little girl who calls Jake Thompson a hero, when they see how his death has affected not just her, but his K-9 partner, when they understand the full scope of what Marcus Webb destroyed with his selfish, cowardly act, I think they'll see past the defense's attempt to minimize his crimes. Maria stood up, her resolve strengthening. Emma keeps asking when the bad man is going to say sorry for hurting Officer Jake. She thinks if he just apologizes, everything will be okay again. She doesn't understand that some things can't be fixed with sorry. But maybe, Sean said quietly, she can help us make sure he faces the consequences of refusing to be sorry. In the first place, as the Rodriguez family left his office, Sean stared out the window again, but this time his view was different. Instead of seeing just another case to be won or lost, he saw a community that had lost a hero, a little girl who had lost her sense of safety, and a dog who had lost his purpose. Marcus Webb hadn't just set a fire that night, he had shattered lives. But sometimes, Sean thought as he began drafting his response to the defense's play motion, the broken pieces could be reassembled into something even stronger than before. And sometimes, the most powerful weapon in a prosecutor's arsenal wasn't evidence or legal precedent. It was truth, presented in its purest form. Emma Rodriguez and Rex were going to court. The Hamilton County Courthouse had never seen anything quite like the scene unfolding on this crisp October morning. By 7:30 a.m., 3 hours before the scheduled sentencing hearing for Marcus Webb, the steps leading to the main entrance were crowded with police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and community members, all wearing black ribbons in honor of Officer Jake Thompson. Local news crews had set up their equipment along the perimeter, their reporters speaking in hushed, respectful tones as they prepared to cover what many were calling the most emotionally charged hearing in the county's history. Inside courtroom 3L, the atmosphere was electric with tension and grief. Judge Patricia Williams had arrived early to review the case file one final time, knowing that the decisions made today would reverberate through the community for years to come. She had been on the bench for 15 years and had presided over countless murder cases. But something about this one felt different. Perhaps it was the unusual request from District Attorney Chun to allow a 3-year-old child and a police dog to be present during sentencing. Or perhaps it was the knowledge that a genuine hero's legacy hung in the balance. Detective Sarah Martinez sat in the front row, her dress uniform perfectly pressed, her badge polished to a brilliant shine. Beside her sat Rex, the German Shepherd's powerful frame motionless, except for the occasional flick of his ears at familiar voices. Rex wore his official K9 vest, complete with Jake's badge number, and a small memorial patch that read, "In honor of Officer Jake Thompson, hero and partner." Sarah had spent the past week working with Rex, preparing him for this moment, knowing that his behavior today could influence the judge's final decision on Webb's sentence. Rex had been struggling since Jake's death 6 weeks ago. The department's veterinarian had prescribed mild anti-anxiety medication after Rex refused to eat for 4 days straight, and the police dog trainer had worked extensively with him to prevent complete behavioral regression. But yesterday, during his second visit with Emma Rodriguez at the hospital, something had shifted. For 2 hours, Rex had been the calm, protective partner Jake had trained him to be, responding to Emma's gentle commands and even managing to eat treats from her small hands. 3 rows behind Sarah, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez sat with their daughter between them, Emma's tiny frame dwarfed by the formal courtroom setting. Emma wore her best dress, a navy blue outfit with white polka dots that her grandmother had bought, especially for this important day. In her lap, she clutched the stuffed German Shepherd she called Little Rex, its fur now clean from the hospital's laundry service, but still bearing the faint scent of smoke that reminded everyone of how it had survived the fire. Emma's eyes were fixed on the real Rex with the unwavering focus that only small children possess. She had been asking questions all morning. Why does Rex look so sad? When will we see Officer Jake? Is the bad man going to say sorry today? Maria and Carlos had done their best to prepare her for what would happen, explaining that this was the day when the judge would decide what punishment the bad man would receive for his actions. But Emma's 3-year-old mind struggled to understand why Officer Jake couldn't just come to court to tell everyone he was okay. The bailiff, Officer Michael Torres, had been Jake's friend and occasional partner on community outreach events. He stood at attention near the judge's bench, his usually stoic expression softened by the presence of the child whose life Jake had died to save. Torres had volunteered to work this hearing specifically because he wanted to be present when justice was served for his fallen brother. At the defense table, Marcus Webb sat hunched over in his Orange County Jail jumpsuit, his wrists shackled with chains that clinked softly whenever he moved. His attorney, Patricia Summers, shuffled through her papers with nervous energy, knowing that her client's fate largely depended on her ability to maintain the narrative, that Webb was a misguided man who had made a terrible mistake, not a cold-blooded killer. Webb himself appeared to have aged 10 years in the 6 weeks since his arrest. His thinning hair had grown unkempt, his complexion was sallow from lack of sunlight, and his eyes darted constantly around the courtroom, as if looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Summers had advised Webb to show remorse during the hearing, to look directly at the Rodriguez family, and apologize for the pain his actions had caused. But Webb seemed incapable of even that small gesture of humanity. Instead, he stared down at his hands, occasionally glancing toward the prosecution table, where District Attorney Chun sat, surrounded by boxes of evidence and victim impact statements. Chun had spent the previous evening reviewing his strategy one final time. The defense's plea negotiation had fallen through when Webb refused to accept responsibility for Jake's death, insisting to the end that he had never intended to hurt anyone. Now, facing the possibility of life in prison, Webb seemed to be retreating into himself, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of what he had done. The courtroom began to fill with additional spectators as 9:30 approached. Jake's fellow K-9 officers entered as a group, their dogs walking in perfect formation beside them, a living honor guard for their fallen handler. The sight of 6 German shepherds moving in synchronized precision through the courtroom brought tears to many eyes, including Emma's. "Mama, look at all of Rex's friends," Emma whispered excitedly, her voice carrying in the quiet courtroom. They came to say goodbye to Officer Jake too. Fire Chief Rodriguez, no relation to Emma's family despite the shared surname, took his seat with several of his firefighters who had responded to the Maple Street fire that fateful night. They had arrived at the scene to find Jake's patrol car empty and Rex barking frantically at the burning house, and they had been among the first to understand the magnitude of the sacrifice taking place inside. Dr. Elizabeth Warner, the child psychologist who had been working with Emma, sat near the back of the courtroom with her notebook and observations about Emma's progress. She was prepared to testify about the long-term psychological impact of Jake's death on Emma, how the trauma had affected her sleep patterns, her ability to feel safe, and her understanding of mortality, concepts far too advanced for a 3-year-old mind to process. As the minutes ticked toward 10 a.m., the tension in the room became almost palpable. Conversations died to whispers, then to complete silence. Emma, sensing the change in atmosphere, moved closer to her father and asked in a voice that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet courtroom, "Daddy, is Officer Jake watching us from heaven? I want him to know that Rex is being very good today." The question hung in the air like a prayer, and several people in the courtroom wiped away tears. Rex's ears perked up at the mention of Jake's name, and he turned his head toward Emma with an expression that seemed almost human in its sadness and recognition. At exactly 10 a.m., the bailiff called the court to order. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Williams. As Judge Williams entered the courtroom, her black robes flowing behind her, Emma stood on her chair to see better. The sight of the small child, the living reminder of Jake Thompson's ultimate sacrifice, standing among the sea of uniforms and grieving faces, created a moment of profound silence. Judge Williams took her seat and surveyed the packed courtroom, her experienced eyes taking in the unusual mix of law enforcement, family members, and community supporters. Her gaze lingered for a moment on Emma and Rex, both symbols of what had been lost and what had been saved on that terrible night 6 weeks ago. "Be seated," she said quietly, and the rustling of fabric and creaking of wooden benches seemed to echo through the chamber. "We are here today for the sentencing of Marcus Webb in the matter of the People v. Webb, case number CR202411847. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the extraordinary circumstances of this case and the presence of some very special individuals in our courtroom. Today, Emma waved shyly when she realized the judge was looking in her direction, causing a ripple of gentle laughter through the tense courtroom. But as Marcus Webb was officially brought before the bench to face the consequences of his actions, the laughter died away, replaced by the weight of justice waiting to be served. The moment everyone had been waiting for was about to begin. Judge Williams adjusted her reading glasses and began to speak, her voice carrying the weight of 15 years on the bench. "The court will now hear victim impact statements before proceeding to sentencing. Mr. Chun, you may call your first witness." District Attorney Chun rose from his seat, his movements deliberate and measured. He had choreographed this moment carefully, knowing that the order of testimony would build to an emotional crescendo that even the most hardened defense attorney couldn't dismiss. "Your Honor," the people call Fire Chief Michael Rodriguez to the stand. As the fire chief made his way to the witness box, Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, that man has the same name as us. Is he our family?" Her innocent question carried clearly through the quiet courtroom, bringing gentle smiles to several faces, despite the solemn proceedings. Fire Chief Rodriguez was sworn in and took his seat, his weathered hands folded carefully in his lap. His testimony was powerful but controlled, describing the scene his crew encountered that night, the intensity of the flames, the structural instability of the house, and the moment they realized a police officer was still inside attempting a rescue. Officer Thompson made 3 separate entries into that burning structure, the fire chief said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. The first 2 times, he successfully evacuated Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez. When he went back for their daughter, my crew was ordered to prepare for a full collapse. The last radio transmission we heard from Officer Thompson was him saying, "I've got the child. We're coming out." They never did. Emma listened intently, her small face scrunched with concentration as she tried to understand the grown-up words. When she heard her parents' names mentioned, she whispered loudly, "That's Mama and Daddy. Officer Jake saved them too." Her innocent commentary provided a heartbreaking counterpoint to the technical testimony about structural collapse and rescue protocols. Next, Chun called Detective Sarah Martinez to the stand. Sarah's testimony focused on the investigation that led to Webb's arrest, but her voice broke slightly when she described Rex's behavior in the days following Jake's death. "Rex is an 8-year veteran of the force," Sarah explained, her eyes briefly meeting Rex's across the courtroom. "He's been trained to handle high-stress situations, loud noises, chaotic environments. But in the weeks following Officer Thompson's death, Rex exhibited signs of severe depression. He refused food, wouldn't respond to commands from other handlers, and showed no interest in his training exercises or toys. The department veterinarian said he'd never seen such a profound grief reaction in a working dog. As if sensing he was being discussed, Rex lifted his head from his resting position and looked directly at Detective Martinez. The movement was slight, but it was the first time in weeks that Rex had shown any response to his name or attention from his colleagues. Emma noticed Rex's movement immediately. She had been fidgeting in her seat, occasionally whispering questions to her parents or playing quietly with little Rex. But when she saw the real Rex lift his head, her entire demeanor changed. She sat up straighter, her brown eyes fixed on the German Shepherd with laser-like intensity. "Mama," Emma whispered, her voice filled with sudden understanding. "Rex looks so sad. He misses his daddy, doesn't he?" Maria nodded, her own tears threatening to fall. "Yes, baby. Rex misses Officer Jake very much." Judge Williams called for a brief recess before the final phase of the hearing, Webb's sentencing. During the 10-minute break, the courtroom buzzed with quiet conversation, but Emma remained focused on Rex. She began to squirm in her seat, clearly wanting to approach the dog, but unsure if she was allowed. "Daddy, can I go say hi to Rex? He looks lonely." Carlos looked toward District Attorney Chun, who nodded almost imperceptibly. This wasn't part of the planned proceedings, but sometimes the most powerful moments came from spontaneous human connection. "You can wave to him from here, Princessa," Carlos said gently. "But we need to stay in our seats while the judge is working." Emma stood on her chair and waved enthusiastically at Rex. "Hi, Rex." "It's me, Emma. Do you remember me from the hospital?" Rex's response was immediate and unprecedented. The dog who had barely acknowledged anyone for 6 weeks suddenly stood up, his tail giving the slightest wag. His ears perked forward, and he took a small step in Emma's direction before Detective Martinez's gentle stay command stopped him. But the damage was done, or rather, the healing had begun. For the first time since Jake's death, Rex had shown genuine interest in someone, and that someone was the little girl his partner had died to save. When court resumed, Judge Williams began reading the charges against Marcus Webb. The defendant was ordered to stand as she recited the litany of his crimes: arson in the first degree, murder in the first degree, reckless endangerment, and destruction of property. It was at this moment, as Webb stood with his back to the courtroom, that something magical and heartbreaking happened. Emma, who had been listening to the long list of legal terms she didn't understand, suddenly gasped and pointed directly at Rex. Her small voice rang out through the silent courtroom with crystal clarity. "That's my hero, Doggy. That's Jake's Rex." The courtroom held its collective breath, but Emma wasn't finished. Standing on her chair with the fearless confidence that only small children possess, she continued, "Rex, Rex, look at me. It's Emma. Your daddy saved me from the fire." What happened next would be talked about in legal circles for years to come. Rex, who had been lying quietly beside Detective Martinez throughout the entire proceeding, suddenly rose to his feet. But instead of staying in place as his training dictated, the grieving dog walked directly toward Emma with purpose and determination that surprised everyone in the room. Detective Martinez started to call him back, but Judge Williams held up her hand. "Let him go," she said quietly, her own eyes filling with tears. Rex approached Emma's row with dignity and grace, his steps measured and deliberate. When he reached her, he sat directly in front of her chair and looked up into her face with an expression that seemed almost human in its recognition and gratitude. Emma climbed down from her chair, and without any fear or hesitation, wrapped her small arms around Rex's massive neck. The German Shepherd, trained to be strong and stoic in all circumstances, gently lowered his head and rested it against Emma's shoulder. "Your daddy is a hero," Emma whispered into Rex's fur, her words audible in the pin-drop silence of the courtroom. "He saved me and Mama and Daddy. You should be so proud of your daddy, Rex. He was the bravest man in the whole world." Rex's tail began to wag, slowly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. It was the first time he had wagged his tail since Jake's death, and the sight of it broke the emotional dam that had been building in the courtroom. Hardened police officers wiped tears from their eyes. Firefighters who had seen decades of tragedy found themselves reaching for tissues. Even some of the court staff were crying openly. But perhaps most remarkably, Marcus Webb had turned around and was staring at the scene with an expression of dawning horror, as if he was finally understanding the full magnitude of what his actions had destroyed. Emma pulled back from Rex and looked into his intelligent brown eyes. "I have something for you," she said, reaching for little Rex, her stuffed German Shepherd. "This is little Rex. He kept me safe after the fire, just like how your daddy kept me safe. But I think you need him more than I do now." She placed the stuffed dog gently in front of Rex, who sniffed it carefully before picking it up in his mouth with the gentleness he had been trained to use with evidence or fragile items. The sight of the massive police dog holding a child's toy with such tenderness was the final straw for everyone's emotional composure. Judge Williams removed her glasses and took a moment to collect herself. Defense Attorney Summers was crying openly. Even the bailiff, trained to maintain order and decorum, had tears streaming down his face. But it was Emma's next words that would haunt everyone in that courtroom for the rest of their lives. Looking up at Judge Williams with the innocent wisdom that only children possess, she asked, "Judge lady, can Rex come live with us now? Jake can't take care of him anymore, and Rex needs a family. I promise we'll take really good care of him, and we'll tell him stories about how brave his daddy was every single day." In that moment, with a 3-year-old child offering to heal a grieving dog's broken heart. Everyone in the courtroom understood that they weren't just witnessing a legal proceeding. They were witnessing the birth of something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. The beginning of a new family, forged by loss but strengthened by love. The silence in courtroom 3A was deafening after Emma's innocent request to adopt Rex. Judge Patricia Williams sat motionless at her bench, her reading glasses in her hand, watching as a 3-year-old child knelt beside a grieving police dog in what had suddenly become the most profound moment of her 15-year judicial career. The image before her, a small girl in a polka dot dress, offering comfort to a massive German shepherd, seemed to encapsulate everything that was both beautiful and tragic about the human condition. Emma remained on her knees beside Rex, her small hand gently stroking his fur while he held her stuffed dog in his mouth. She looked up at Judge Williams with the absolute trust that only children possess, waiting for an answer to her question, as if the most powerful person in the room could simply wave a magic wand and make everything better. "Sweetheart," Judge Williams said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "that's a very special question, and it deserves a very special answer. But first, I need to finish some important work here in court. Can you be patient with me for just a little while longer?" Emma nodded solemnly, then whispered something in Rex's ear that made his tail wag again. The sight of that small gesture, a child comforting an animal in grief, sent ripples of emotion through the packed courtroom. Several jurors wiped their eyes, and even the court stenographer, trained to remain impartial and focused on her work, had to pause to collect herself. Judge Williams turned her attention back to Marcus Webb, who stood at the defendant's table with his shoulders hunched and his head bowed. For the first time since his arrest, Webb appeared to be genuinely grappling with the reality of what his actions had caused. The abstract concept of collateral damage had just taken the form of a 3-year-old girl comforting the partner of the man he had killed. "Mr. Webb," Judge Williams said, her voice regaining its judicial authority, "you have been found guilty on all charges. Before I impose sentence, the court gives you the opportunity to make a statement. Do you wish to address the court?" Defense attorney Patricia Summers whispered urgently in Webb's ear, but he shook his head and stepped forward slightly. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible, forcing everyone in the courtroom to strain to hear him. I never meant for anyone to die," Webb began, his words stumbling over themselves. "I was angry, and I was drunk, and I just wanted to scare Tommy Hartley. I thought the house was empty. I never knew there was a family inside. I never knew about ... double quotes." His voice broke as he looked toward Emma, who was now sitting cross-legged beside Rex, both of them watching him with curious interest. "That little girl almost died because of what I did," Webb continued, tears beginning to stream down his face. "And that police officer, Officer Thompson, he died saving her. He died because I was too stupid and selfish to think about anyone but myself." Emma tilted her head to one side, processing Webb's words with the earnest concentration she usually reserved for bedtime stories. She stood up slowly and took a step toward the defendant's table, causing both her parents and the bailiff to tense with concern. "Are you the bad man who started the fire?" Emma asked, her voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. There was no fear in her tone, only the matter-of-fact curiosity that defined childhood. Webb looked down at her, this tiny person whose life he had nearly destroyed, and nodded mutely. Emma studied his face for a long moment, then asked the question that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Why did you want to hurt people? Didn't anyone ever teach you that fire is dangerous?" The simplicity of her question, the way she reduced his complex web of jealousy, anger, and revenge to a basic failure of understanding right from wrong, seemed to shatter whatever composure Webb had left. He sank into his chair and covered his face with his shackled hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered through his fingers. "I'm so sorry. I would take it back if I could. I would give anything to bring Officer Thompson back." Emma looked at him for another moment, then walked back to Rex and sat down beside him. "Rex," she said in her clear, innocent voice, "the bad man says he's sorry. Do you think Officer Jake would forgive him?" Rex looked at Emma, then toward Webb, then back at Emma. His response was to gently drop the stuffed dog from his mouth and place his head in Emma's lap, as if seeking comfort from the only person in the room who could offer it without judgment or conditions. Dr. Elizabeth Warner, watching from the back of the courtroom, made rapid notes about what she was witnessing. In all her years of child psychology, she had never seen a trauma victim display such emotional maturity and empathy toward this person who had caused their suffering. Emma's ability to separate the man from his actions, to see Webb as someone who had made terrible choices rather than an irredeemably evil person, demonstrated a level of emotional intelligence that most adults never achieved. Judge Williams called for a 15-minute recess, needing time to process what she had just witnessed. As the courtroom began to empty for the break, Emma remained beside Rex, talking to him in the soft, nonsensical way that children talk to animals they love. "You know what, Rex?" Emma said, her voice just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I think Officer Jake is watching us right now, and I think he's happy that we found each other. Mama says that when people go to heaven, they can still see us and still love us. So even though Jake can't hug you anymore, his love is still here." She gestured around the courtroom, encompassing all the police officers, firefighters, and community members who had gathered to honor Jake's memory. "Look at all these people who loved your daddy, Rex. You're not alone. You have so many people who want to take care of you." Carlos Rodriguez approached them carefully, kneeling down beside his daughter. "Emma, sweetheart, we need to talk about what you asked the judge. Adopting Rex would be a very big responsibility. He's not like other dogs. He's been trained to work with police officers." Emma looked up at her father with the patient expression children use when they're about to explain something obvious to a slow adult. "Daddy, Rex doesn't want to be a police dog anymore. He wants to be a family dog. He wants to protect me the same way Jake protected me. Don't you see? Jake sent Rex to us so we could all take care of each other." Maria Rodriguez joined them, sitting on Emma's other side. "Baby, Rex is a very special dog, and there are probably rules about who can adopt police dogs. It might not be as simple as just asking, but Mama," Emma said with the unwavering logic of childhood, "sometimes grown-ups make rules without thinking about what's right. Judge Williams seems like a smart lady. I think she knows that Rex belongs with us now." Detective Sarah Martinez had been listening to this conversation from a few feet away. She approached the family hesitantly, then knelt down to Emma's eye level. "Emma, can I tell you something about Rex?" she asked gently. "Rex has been very sad since Officer Jake died. He wouldn't eat, he wouldn't play, and he didn't want to work anymore. But today, sitting here with you, he looks happy for the first time in weeks. I think maybe you're right. Maybe Jake did send Rex to you." Emma beamed at Detective Martinez with the radiant smile of a child whose wisdom has been recognized by an adult. "Will you help us ask Judge Williams if Rex can come home with us? I promise we'll take really good care of him. And I'll tell him stories about Jake every day, so he never forgets how brave his daddy was." As court reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted from one of legal proceedings to something more profound. A community grappling with questions of justice, mercy, forgiveness, and healing. Emma had transformed the courtroom from a place where punishment was dispensed to a place where the possibility of redemption for both man and beast hung in the balance. Judge Williams returned to her bench with a heavy heart and a difficult decision to make. She had to sentence Marcus Webb according to the law, but she also had to address the unprecedented situation of a child requesting to adopt a police dog in open court. More than that, she had to find a way to honor the memory of a fallen hero while acknowledging the healing power of innocent love. As she looked out over the courtroom, at Emma sitting beside Rex, at the grieving officers who had lost a brother, at Webb waiting to learn his fate, at the family who had lost their sense of safety but found the strength to offer forgiveness, Judge Williams realized that sometimes the most important verdicts weren't about punishment or deterrence. Sometimes they were about finding a way for broken hearts to heal and broken lives to find new purpose. The next few minutes would determine not just Marcus Webb's future, but the future of a little girl and a grieving dog who had found each other in the midst of unimaginable loss. Judge Patricia Williams took a deep breath and surveyed the courtroom one final time before delivering what she knew would be the most important sentences of her career. The weight of Solomon's wisdom pressed heavily on her shoulders as she prepared to balance justice with mercy, punishment with healing, the law with the deeper truths that sometimes transcended legal precedent. Marcus Webb, she began, her voice carrying the full authority of the bench. You have been found guilty of first-degree murder, arson, and reckless endangerment. Your actions on the night of September 15th resulted in the death of Officer Jake Thompson, a decorated police officer who died protecting innocent lives. Your selfish pursuit of revenge nearly cost the lives of an entire family and destroyed a hero who represented the very best of our community. Webb stood with his head bowed, his entire body trembling as Judge Williams continued. The court has considered the defense's argument that you never intended to kill anyone, but intent is not the only measure of criminal responsibility. When you chose to purchase gasoline, when you chose to pour accelerant around a residential structure, when you chose to light that fire, you set in motion a chain of events that any reasonable person could have foreseen might result in death or serious injury. Emma listened intently from her position beside Rex, her small hand resting on the dog's head. She didn't understand all the legal terminology, but she could sense the gravity in Judge Williams' voice and the finality approaching in the air around them. However, Judge Williams continued, and the single word sent a ripple of tension through the courtroom. This court has also witnessed something extraordinary today. We have seen the power of innocence to transform hatred into healing, the ability of a child's love to reach across the chasm of tragedy and offer hope to both man and beast. She looked directly at Emma, who met her gaze with the fearless curiosity of childhood. Young lady, your request to adopt Rex has presented this court with an unusual situation. Police canine officers are typically retired to their handlers' families or to specialized care facilities. But these are not typical circumstances. Detective Sarah Martinez felt her heart racing. She had spent the recess on the phone with the police chief, the K-9 unit supervisor, and even the mayor, all of whom had been following the proceedings closely. The unanimous consensus was unprecedented. If the Rodriguez family was truly willing and able to care for Rex, and if the court approved the arrangement, the police department would support Emma's request. After consulting with the relevant authorities, Judge Williams announced, and after observing the remarkable bond that has formed between Emma Rodriguez and Rex, this court hereby approves the transfer of custody of retired police canine Rex to the Rodriguez family, contingent upon a home inspection and the completion of a basic canine care course. The courtroom erupted in applause and tears. Emma jumped up from her sitting position and threw her arms around Rex's neck, whispering, "Did you hear that, Rex? You get to come home with us. You're going to be my dog now, and I'm going to be your person." Rex's tail wagged so enthusiastically that his entire body wiggled with joy. For the first time since Jake's death, the light had returned to his intelligent brown eyes. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was ready to live again, to love again, to protect again. But Judge Williams wasn't finished. She turned her attention back to Marcus Webb, who had been watching the joyful scene with an expression of profound regret and self-loathing. "Mr. Webb, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Officer Jake Thompson. Additionally, you will serve concurrent sentences of 20 years for arson and 10 years for reckless endangerment." The gavel came down with finality, sealing Webb's fate. As Webb was led away in shackles, he stopped beside Emma and Rex. The little girl looked up at him with those same innocent eyes that had seen through his defenses earlier. "Mr. Webb?" Emma said quietly, "I hope you learn to be a better person in prison. Officer Jake would want you to be sorry for real, not just because you got caught." Webb knelt down awkwardly, his chains clanking, and looked directly into Emma's eyes. "I am sorry, little one. I'm sorrier than you'll ever know. You take good care of Rex, okay? He's a good dog, and he deserves a family who will love him." Emma nodded solemnly. "I will. And Mr. Webb? Maybe someday, when you're really truly sorry in your heart, Officer Jake will forgive you from heaven. Mama says forgiveness is always possible if you really mean it." As Webb was escorted from the courtroom, tears streaming down his face, many observers realized they had witnessed something rarely seen in a court of law: the possibility of redemption, offered freely by a child who had every reason to hate but chose love instead. 6 months later, the morning sun cast long shadows across Riverside Memorial Park as hundreds of community members gathered for the dedication of the Officer Jake Thompson Memorial. The bronze statue depicted Jake in his uniform with Rex by his side, both figures looking out protectively over the park where children played and families gathered. Emma Rodriguez, now 3.5 years old, stood proudly beside the real Rex, who wore a special ceremonial collar for the occasion. Both had grown in the months since the trial. Emma more confident and articulate, Rex healthier and more vibrant than anyone had thought possible. Police Chief Robert Morrison stepped to the microphone, his voice carrying clearly through the crisp autumn air. "6 months ago, we lost one of our finest officers. But today, we celebrate not just Jake Thompson's sacrifice, but the healing that can emerge from tragedy when communities come together with love and purpose." Emma had been chosen to unveil the memorial plaque, and as the cloth fell away, she read the inscription aloud in her clear, strong voice: "Officer Jake Thompson, hero, partner, friend. His courage saved lives, and his memory inspires us all." After the ceremony, Dr. Elizabeth Warner approached the Rodriguez family with a clipboard full of notes. Her 6-month study of Emma's recovery had yielded remarkable results that were already being presented at child psychology conferences across the country. "Emma's progress has been extraordinary," Dr. Warner explained to Maria and Carlos. "Children who experience trauma at her age typically show symptoms for years: nightmares, anxiety, difficulty forming attachments. But Emma's nightmares stopped completely 3 weeks after Rex came home with you. Her ability to process the trauma through her relationship with Rex has created a healing model that we're now recommending for other cases." Rex, meanwhile, had become something of a celebrity in the neighborhood. Children would run up to him during their daily walks, eager to pet the hero dog and hear Emma tell the story of how Officer Jake had saved her and how Rex had become her protector. The German Shepherd seemed to understand his new role perfectly. No longer a working police dog, but a guardian and companion whose mere presence brought comfort and security. "Tell them about the dreams, Emma," Maria encouraged as a local news reporter prepared to interview the family. Emma's face lit up with excitement. "Oh, I have the best dreams now. I dream about Officer Jake flying around like an angel, and he always waves at me and Rex. And sometimes in my dreams, Jake comes down and plays fetch with Rex, and they're both so happy. When I wake up, I tell Rex all about it, and his tail wags like he knows exactly what I'm talking about." As the crowd began to disperse, Emma and Rex made their way to the memorial statue. Emma placed a small bouquet of flowers at the base, while Rex sat at attention beside her, his posture respectful and dignified. "Officer Jake," Emma said to the bronze figure, "Rex is the best dog ever, just like you said he would be. He sleeps in my room every night, and he walks with me to school every day, and he even learned to play fetch with my toys. He's not sad anymore, because he knows how much we love him." She paused, then added with the profound simplicity that had become her trademark, "Thank you for saving me, and thank you for sending me Rex. I think you knew we would need each other." As Emma and Rex walked hand in hand, or rather, hand in paw, back toward their family, Detective Sarah Martinez watched from a distance and smiled. She had attended every milestone in Emma's recovery and Rex's rehabilitation, documenting their progress for the department's files. But more than that, she had witnessed something that restored her faith in the possibility of hope emerging from the darkest circumstances. The story that had begun with a devastating fire and a hero's sacrifice had transformed into something beautiful and life-affirming. A little girl who had lost her sense of safety had found it again in the companionship of a grieving dog. A police K-9 who had lost his purpose had discovered a new mission in protecting and loving a child. A community that had been shattered by senseless violence had found healing through the simple power of innocence and unconditional love. As Emma and Rex disappeared around the corner toward home, their bond visible in every synchronized step they took together, everyone who watched them understood that they weren't just seeing a girl and her dog. They were witnessing the living proof that from the ashes of tragedy, the most beautiful relationships can grow, and that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who teach us how to heal.